Hello, everyone. This is Joseph Anderson with the Joseph Writer Anderson podcast. Back with another exciting episode. Today, we are going to be talking all about one of my favorite topics, which is Bleach. So we're going to be talking about the Bleach 1000-Year Blood War Volume 2 that's coming out end of May. I can't believe that this set is already coming out. It feels like just yesterday that I was testing purple bleach at Starbucks, learning how to play Union Arena, and Volume 2 seemed like forever away. And now here we are in a few short weeks. It's going to be on us before you know it. We're going to be ripping open bleach packs, buffing up our decks, and taking back the meta in the name of Bleach, because some of these decks are going to be so strong. It's just a really exciting time to be a Bleach fan, to be a Union Arena fan. There's Sword Art Online. If you've been following what I've been writing and talking about it, Sword Art Online was a surprisingly solid set. Had very strong mechanics, probably not as a whole quite as strong as One Punch Man, but in a weird way filled a lot of gaps post One Punch Man to compete in the meta better than it might have otherwise. And just a really killer set, and that one just released officially, and just a few weeks later we're getting two more sets. Just such an exciting time to be a Union Arena player, and also it's really exciting to be doing a game that has such frequent releases, because even other games that I cover on the site, if you're a fan of other parts on the site, like Pokemon, still doesn't have as frequent releases. They're still, it's still pretty good cadence, but to just get like one set coming out early May and then two more sets coming out end of May is just phenomenal. And it's not like these sets are like just haphazardly thrown together. These sets are really well thought out, really good quality sets. I don't even know how they do it. It's amazing. Anyways, before getting into it, we're going to be talking about a couple of the spoilers already revealed from Bleach Volume 2. We're going to be talking about some of the stuff that's coming out in this binder set that I'm still a little confused about what this thing is. There's not a lot about it, but we'll talk about what we do know about it. And I did pre-order it, so I think we're coming up on like pretty close to the ending of when you can pre-order this thing. So if you have not pre-ordered this binder set for Bleach and you're a big Bleach fan and you want to play those decks, you might want to check it out, because I think these cards are exclusive to that set, and shipping is $10 from Premium Bandai. So I really probably should have gotten a 4-play set, and that way I saved some money on shipping, because I only bought one because I really didn't know what it was. But you check it out yourself. We'll talk about it a bit more and what we're going to get in that. I think that's additional support that's going to come to Bleach later in the year, come to Bleach decks. So we're going to be talking about all of that. A couple of things that are interesting for people who are interested in other TCGs. I did see that Destined Rivals was one of the top selling sets on TCG Player like recently, and that set hasn't even come out yet. So people are pre-ordering Destined Rivals. That's the upcoming Pokemon set like crazy. So if you're a Destined Rivals Pokemon fan, know that Destined Rivals and Pokemon TCG is well alive in May as well. And then also we did get this massive, for people who are fans of Lorcana, we did get a massive drop on what's going on in Lorcana. Straight from the Ravensburger headquarters, they dropped a ton of interesting things. And one of the biggest things about, the thing that I'm most excited about, is it does look like Lorcana has a much brighter future ahead after some of the changes that they're going to make to the Fabled set that's coming out. So I think Fabled, which is coming out in September, is really going to kind of relaunch Lorcana as a game and help it do a little bit better and attract more players and more fans. But you're probably here mostly because you're interested in Union Arena. I'm also super interested in Union Arena. So let's dive into some of the spoilers first, and then we'll get into covering the main decks to know about that are coming out in Bleach Volume 2. This took me a little longer to put together. I think maybe I'm a little bit fatigued still from how into Sword Art Online I got. As my wife said, I put my soul into Sword Art Online because I love that anime. I love the sets. I'm still stoked to play my Goddess deck, even though I've been playing it straight for what has it been, 2 weeks now or whatever. Just yesterday I was playing it over and over and over, testing every possible matchup against just to figure out that deck. It is a little bit of a tricky deck to play. If you were following my last podcast, I was talking about Goddesses. I hadn't done a tournament yet, but I did do a tournament recently, did really well. I think technically I got second, but I kind of consider myself getting first because I then played the first place guy and beat him. So the only deck I lost against was Integrity Knights, weirdly enough. And actually, I've tested that matchup, and I do think Goddess does have the advantage, but for some reason, it is a little bit of a tough matchup just because of the removal you can get with the Integrity Knights deck. And in general, the removal decks are not the best matchup. They're okay. Like I won't get into that because we talked about that a lot earlier. But just knowing that Goddess is already doing well for me and well for other people, I do think it's going to be one of the top meta decks. So moving on from all of that, let's talk about some of the spoilers coming up in Bleach Volume 2. So if you're not familiar with how the Volume 2s work, this is new to me because I have not, unlike some people who are, I guess, following, like some people I think were following Union Arena in Japan before it even came to America, which is crazy to me. But Volume 2 is interesting because it really works as a very supplemental kind of thing to the original set. It actually reminds me a lot, and that's not so much like Pokemon as it reminds me more of Lorcana, because Lorcana, the game, you may not be familiar with Lorcana, but if you are, Lorcana doesn't change a lot from set to set. The cards that come out largely are just supplemental to the existing strategies. The thing about Union Arena is that's obviously not the case because every set is new decks, right? Because every set is based on different anime. But it kind of has the best of both worlds here, where you get like all this new stuff because you're always having these new sets come out based on different titles and animes. But the Volume 2 ends up not really drastically changing the own little world of that specific anime. It really is just bringing in additional cards to buff up your strategy, and they do have a decent impact. This is my first Volume 2 that I'm covering, so I'm kind of learning through it as I go, and it was interesting to me to see how actually little changed for these decks. It's still all largely the same. Just again, some like really incremental gains that we get for certain strategies. And I think we also do get a new energy color, which seems to be the standard with Volume 2s as well, that you get an additional energy color that you did not have before. And we're going to get into all that in a little bit. I will say it's interesting. We have not seen an official review, and if I've missed it, let me know. But we have not seen an official reveal of the SR Triple Star card from Bleach Volume 2 yet. However, obviously, because we can see ahead via the cards that were already released in Japan, the SR Triple Star is probably the best SR Triple Star released to date. It has this gorgeous art. I'm going to link to all this stuff, by the way, in the show notes. So check out the show notes, and you'll see some links to the site where I have all these images shared. But the SR Triple Star of Rukia is absolutely gorgeous. And if you're a fan of Bleach, like, it just doesn't get much better than this. One of the funny things about Bleach, because I've been a fan of Bleach since I was super young, and I was reading ahead in the manga all along, and I was reading even in college, I was reading the manga. So it was like really a big part of my early young adulthood. If you're a fan of Bleach, one of the things that's most fun about Bleach is just to see these characters, them revealing their bankais and things like that. And we had never actually seen, spoiler by the way, for anybody who's not seen 1,000 Year Blood War, maybe skip this part, but we had not seen Rukia's bankai before. And it's a beautiful and powerful bankai, and it's really cool to see her come into her own as a character, not just a supporting character, but as a character who can fight and do battle. And so the blue deck that's going to come out in Bleach Volume 2 is all about Rukia and her powers. And the SR Triple Star that I'm assuming we're going to get in the English version is this gorgeous card that depicts her in her bankai state and really follows that. Really, I don't even know how to explain it, but there's just this beautiful way that the Bleach manga, and if you haven't read the manga, your probably closest thing you've gotten to this is 1,000 Year Blood War, because 1,000 Year Blood War brought in a lot of that artwork style from the manga. And it just has these really cool fonts, and it has this really cool stylization. And that was one of the strongest points of Bleach from the beginning, was just how good its artwork was. So this leans heavily into that side of Bleach. And the card is just awesome. So this SR Triple Star, the thing is, I'm not somebody who's going to go and buy a bunch of boxes in hope of getting the SR Triple Star, which is ironic because I did get the Tanjiro serialized number 75, which I sold. But that was just off of 2 boxes. I'm not someone who chases tons of boxes to get stuff. But this SR triple star Rukia is so cool that it almost makes me want to chase it. But it's up to you. If you want to chase this SR triple star, it's probably not impossible to get, but it probably is pretty darn hard. That being said, I want to talk a little bit about the singles versus buying the products. So it's funny, a lot of people tend to think that buying singles is way cheaper than buying products. And I will say that it is, with like kind of an asterisk, which is depends on when you need them. So if you're going to go the absolute cheapest route, it is to buy singles. It is to buy it like well after a set comes out. The thing is that if you are somebody who's really excited about a set and you want to get in on that, like the excitement of having a new set and trying out things when everybody is new and excited about it, getting singles is really not all that cheap. Like, I was doing a cost estimate of what it would cost me to buy my yellow Asuna deck. You know, as a business owner, I'm trying to keep my costs down always. But I was looking at like how much it would cost if I were to just buy the Asuna deck straight out in terms of singles. And the thing is, it was going to cost me like a ton of money. Like, it was going to cost me several $100s if I wanted it early, and I wanted it early, or at least on time. And so for me, I was like, wow, I could just buy the boxes and trade with some friends. So it's not always the case that buying singles is cheaper. It really depends on what you're trying to do. If you really want to test around, test different decks, try different combos, that's part of my creative process when I deck build, is I like to have a bunch of different cards in front of me and just get creative with it. I don't like to go and start with like a very sterile environment where I'm like building a deck online first. You know, I like to really get in and get my hands on the cards and try different things. It just spurs creativity for me. It helps me come up with combos that I might not otherwise think of. But so if you're really looking more to just explore an entire set, then actually in a way, buying boxes really isn't way less cost effective than buying singles. I would actually say it's better to buy boxes. And in Union Arena, because I like to test a lot of decks, I buy boxes. So that being said, because of how little actually changes for some of these decks, I would say if you aren't like super keen on just chasing rares and trying every single deck, this is not a bad set to just buy singles from. So yeah, just keep that in mind. If you're looking just to upgrade your favorite Bleach deck, then yeah, you could probably get away with just buying a couple singles online after the set launches, and it'll be a bit cheaper. But if you really, really just love Bleach and you want to just immerse yourself in that world and try everything out, there's enough new stuff here. Like, there are 2 new decks, I would say, that are kind of net new three net new decks to Union Arena, and that's up to you whether or not that's worth investing in a bunch of boxes for. So, but yeah, I think it's interesting. It's the first set where I'm like, oh yeah, I could totally just buy singles if I wanted to. It wouldn't be a big deal. So with all of that being said, let's talk a bit about the cards coming out later in the year. So there's this thing that's coming out. Again, I'm going to share the link to this so you can get more info from my site, but it's like this binder collection that I don't know like a ton about, but it's like has these unique cards that you can only get from the binder collection, and they're going to add additional support to volume 2. So starting out, we do have this 3-cost blue Ichigo, and he's actually just a really solid, well-rounded card. He's a 3-cost boost to 4K. And if you put a card into your sideline during that turn from your hand, and that happens a lot in blue Bleach, so that's not a huge issue. It does have double block, which is handy, and has 2 energy gens. So just a really solid Bleach character. There's a Rukia character that lets you search for a couple of cards on the top of your deck. That's also in blue. There's this really cool 5-cost Renji. Kind of like replaces the other 5-cost Renji that does the BP reduction, but this guy has nullify impact and seems really strong. Unless I'm misunderstanding his activate, but I guess his activate main lets him switch to active, which is really cool. And he's 4,000 BP 5-cost Renji purple character, fits really well into the purple Bleach strategy, or Byakuya as well. We have a 1-cost Shinji who lets you look for look at the top 2 cards and place one at the top, one at the bottom. That would probably go into any deck that's running Bleach Green, decent card. The four cost Kenpachi is really insane. And he's really going to help out any deck that runs Kenpachi, and could also be used to further buff Kenpachi as its own strategy. But he basically counts as a 3-cost character, but he has the 4 cost just because the raid Kenpachi but gains benefits from being raided onto a 4-cost character. So that's a way of kind of working around that while also making him a little easier. And having the 2 energy gen is really nice for a Kenpachi character. And then we have a Mayuri Kurosuchi. He's that crazy scientist guy, and he unlocks a couple of interesting options to help out your blue Kurosuchi zombie deck. We have a really interesting purple Byakuya, so I'm really... I was just saying this to some people that I'm most excited about the Byakuya deck coming out. And if you've been following me from the start, Byakuya has always been a really... preferred deck of mine. It's kind of fallen off a little bit lately because of some of the matchups, but it gets a lot of support in Volume 2. And this card too, this could basically replace, in my list I'm going to share, it has a Renji that this could essentially replace and lets you look for some cards and sideline some cards. So this is going to be a must-have in a Byakuya deck, and just sort of further establishes Byakuya as his own deck. And then a really powerful card coming to the Toshiro strategy is a much stronger Toshiro color trigger. So if you know the color trigger with Toshiro now, he's not a very strong card. He's like a 2 action cost and has some BP, but he's just not very strong. This is a much stronger Toshiro. It's going to really help Toshiro out. And he just has 2 energy gen, 3 cost character, 2 energy gen. Super helpful to have that. Has the color trigger, and he just draws a card when he's played. So just a really strong card for that deck strategy is really going to help out the Toshiro strategy. There's a weird Kisuke that you like switch an active character on your front line to resting, and then Kisuke gains like extra energy gen. I like him because he's a 1 cost, so he could essentially replace your Orihime. You could use him on somebody before you raid them, and then just raid them, and that way you get added advantages that way. But it could be that having to switch a character to resting isn't always ideal. So I'm not sure how strong this guy is going to be, but he could be an interesting alternative to Orihime or to the 2-cost Kisuke, who doesn't have a trigger when this guy has a trigger, and also it's just really effective being a 1-cost character. And then we have the Shinsui Kyoraku. Shinsui, great guy. He also unlocks some additional like card search at the top of your, looking through the top of your deck. So you essentially don't have to run that 13 course guard squads anymore. That searching card, that event card that lets you search for a couple cards. There's going to be enough search capabilities coming into Bleach Green that you're not going to have to run that event card, which kind of is really nice because that's a triggerless event card that is it's not the most fun to have to run that, but it really was almost necessary unless if you were running the Unohana. Otherwise, you kind of had to run that event card, and it didn't have a trigger. It was a little bit of a bummer to run. But yeah, you're going to have plenty of cards that let you search. So this is going to really help advance any deck that runs that. And then you also have the Joshiro Ikitake, who is a 3-cost character that lets you gain energy. I'm not exactly sure what he's playing into, but maybe you could use him in the Old Man deck to gain a little bit more energy. I don't think he's going to probably be the strongest of all these getting released, but if people are wanting to run Old Man or Unohana, he could be an interesting option to have. So that's all the stuff that's coming out in the Binder collection. Really interesting to see those cards and all of their text. So, but yeah, we have to wait a while for those to come out. If you haven't already, the pre-orders are available a little longer. I might go back and order a couple more sets just so I don't miss out on upgrading my Bleach when it comes out. But yeah, could be. It also could be maybe those singles won't be too expensive. It's hard to know. Anywho, now for the main event. Let's move on to the decks that are coming out in Bleach Volume 2, and there are 7 of them. So we're going to talk a bit more about some, a lot more than others. I did leave 2 out. I may end up eventually adding them in because it's not like they don't get anything from Volume 2, but I really have not seen the Yuhaha, or however you say his name. I still don't know how to say his name, even though I'm a big fan of Bleach, but that guy, the Quincy King, I don't see it like much support really coming for his strategy, and his strategy has really fallen off in the meta. It was decent at one point. Like, it was actually, I would say, even almost like a top meta deck at one point, really, really early on. But I don't see much support coming to that deck in Volume 2. And obviously, if I realize I made a mistake on that and come across something, I will probably update my article. So again, this article will be linked in the show notes. But I don't see a ton affecting him, and he's just not going to probably be a big threat in the meta anyway. So I'm leaving him out of this list. I'm also actually leaving Yamamoto out for right now, just because there are a couple of things that you could add into Yamamoto, but I just don't. I think given what we're getting from Kenpachi and for Toshiro, I just don't see Yamamoto being a huge deck following Bleach Volume 2. It doesn't get a lot of like direct support for Yamamoto. It's really more peripheral support for 13 court cards in general, but I think the preferred way of running that's going to be in either a Kenpachi or a Toshiro or a mixed Kenpachi Toshiro deck. So I've left those two out, but I might add them back in more in depth later to the article. So stay tuned for that. But starting things out, we're going to go through each one of these from weakest to strongest, and at the number 7, the very bottom, I have the Kurosuchi Zombies deck. So this one just really, I looked through it just didn't really spark a lot of like excitement for me. I didn't really think it was probably likely to do a lot. It seems like maybe a budgeted down blue deck that you can get your hands on. It also just seems like a little bit slapped on to blue. I don't know if you've noticed this, but when you play Union Arena and you build decks a lot, there's usually like a one main strategy per energy color that's just a lot stronger than the other one, and it's not always the case. Sometimes it's more balanced, and sometimes they're equally interesting. But in this case, it just feels like this deck was sort of thrown on to just have another deck. It seems like it's largely based around swarming the board with different zombie characters and stuff like that. The one thing that really turned me off to this deck is that the special doesn't actually sideline anybody, so you have to like combo it with other things to get all the value out of it. So I just put this at number 7. It didn't seem to have. It seemed like a deck that might be kind of fun for people who want to try out a lot of different cool, interesting combos, but not necessarily like a competitively viable deck. Moving on to another deck that also is very similar in terms of the zombie thing, and that's Bambietta. This deck does feel like a significant step up, though. It has a powerful special, and it has Bambietta. If you remember, she was pretty solid. She was just missing a little bit to be stronger, but I think in Volume 2, she gets a lot of stuff that makes her a lot more usable, and I think this deck could definitely bump up into that tier 2 range, where she could do some stuff in that range. And this deck again is really focused on using like resting effects to then sideline via Bambietta. You get a character that helps extend your 2-cost Bambietta to be a bit stronger. So you have this 3-cost character that lowers the BP of characters on the opposing field, which puts them in much easier range of your 2-cost Bambietta's switch to resting effect. And then you have this character that brings like zombie characters back, so you can kind of swarm the field with zombie characters, including a zombie Bambietta that's pretty strong. So you can unlock a lot of interesting combos that way. I think this deck actually could be kind of decent. It's just there's so many strong decks in Bleach that it ends up being a bit further down. And then right above the number 6 deck, not by a lot, but that's the number 5 Squad Zero deck. This deck was interesting because I feel like in Union Arena, you don't usually get pieces for a deck that are essentially unplayable, but I felt like the Squad Zero as its own strategy was completely unplayable in Volume 1, or not Volume 1, but the base set of Bleach. There really wasn't anything there that you could actually run like a Squad Zero deck. So that was a little weird, but now we do have certainly a strategy forming in Volume 2. It's not a great strategy, but it is an interesting strategy. I like that there's some solid removal, and there's like I think there's a couple of cards that let you scale your removal by quite a bit. And what I mean by that is that you can increase the BP of the character that you can remove, which could be really interesting in our meta with the likes of Lifa with 6,000 BP defending, or like a Saitama with 10,000 BP. That could be interesting to see if this has any answers to that kind of stuff. But ultimately, it just seems like a weaker alternative to Purple Bleach, and obviously, it would probably be a lot cheaper to run this deck than the Purple Bleach. Although it does have the the Ichigo, which we'll get into, the new forecast Ichigo, which that card alone is probably going to be the bulk of your expense for any deck post Volume 2, because that card is the single strongest card in the entire set. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, it seems like it's an interesting enough strategy that I would definitely think it'd be fun to try out. It's not a whole lot better than Bambietta. I think either one of those could be, they're kind of close. You could make an argument that Bambietta is better. But I think that there's enough interesting draw. You get a lot of draw in this deck. There's like some card search and some really powerful removal that has Squad Zero a bit above the yellow Bambietta for me. Moving on to number 4. And number 4 is the blue Rukia and Ichigo deck. And this deck, I was going to be honest, I was pretty excited about it because I really like Rukia as a character, and I really loved when she that moment where her Bankai got introduced. And I also really like Byakuya as a character, so I was kind of excited about the idea of this deck ahead of time. I think once I saw the how much the 2 action point cards played a role, my interest dropped kind of dramatically. I'm not a big fan of having to run 2 action point characters. There are some decks where it makes sense. But a lot of times it's just it's a lot better to not have to play 2 action point cards. So having it be such a big part of that deck strategy, kind of makes it not as interesting to me. I think the aesthetic of this deck, is just a very cold, frozen-y kind of aesthetic, which is really cool, and I like that. But I'm not probably going to play a deck just because of the aesthetic alone. The deck has some interesting combos between all of the 2 action point characters, and has some interesting combos with like Ichigo's draw and other cards that like get bonus effects from being discarded by Ichigo's effect. But ultimately it just feels like it's like a lot of hassle to do what it's doing when you could be playing purple bleach. That's just insane. So it's an interesting deck though. It definitely has some moves. I think it will definitely be competitively viable. This set is full of strong decks, and this deck can definitely be competitively viable. I think it's just when it's compared to some of the strength of the other decks in this set, it just doesn't seem quite as strong to me. Now, moving on into where we start getting into much more elite decks. So I'd say the first 2 we talked about, the first 2 or 3 we talked about were kind of more like your lesser level tier-wise decks. To me, Blue Bleach is definitely more mid-level. But again, we're talking within the context of Bleach, which puts it at a higher level. So this deck is definitely tier 2, and kind of like Blue Bleach could probably compete pretty well with the top tier. But now moving into the much more elite decks that are coming out of Purple Bleach. And we're going to start with the one that I am most excited about, and that is the Byakuya deck. So I was playing Byakuya really early on, and I was playing it in a sort of what people call a pure Byakuya way. So this was without the whole Ichigo 5-cost Ichigo sort of remove a bunch of cards from sideline and just kill anything in the field. I was playing it with just the Byakuya and Renji and the Rukia, and it was really strong back then. It sort of fell off. It was a little tough back then because you had to hit things just right, but it definitely fell off as time went by, and it became harder to play Byakuya just that way. You had to really run it with the Ichigo to be viable. I think that there is an argument that Byakuya can be played kind of as its own deck post Volume 2. I think that it has a lot of added support. One card that actually I did not know was in Volume 2 at the time, but I really was like, man, I wish that Byakuya had this, and that's the 2-cost Byakuya that can lower something on the field by 1,000, and that's exactly like Lelouch, the 2-cost Lelouch from Purple Code Geass. So the only thing is that this Byakuya doesn't have a draw trigger, which makes it a little less handy because you have to like cut other things out for it, but that was the one thing that I was like, man, if Purple Byakuya had that effect, it would be so much stronger. And bam, now you have it. So this definitely extends what you can do in terms of removal. The thing about Byakuya where he really shines is removing multiple characters in a turn. And your ability to remove multiple characters in a turn just got a whole lot stronger because of that 2-cost Byakuya. So that's the main thing changing for Byakuya. I think 2 other interesting things, and this is what you're going to hear about a lot probably is the zero cost Rukia. So she was cut, and even the designer, like the producer of this game, said in like a recent letter about this, that she was purposefully cut from the game because Purple Bleach was just too strong when it came out. And so they preemptively cut her from the game so that Purple Bleach wouldn't be so strong. So we're getting her in the game. She lets you sideline some cards just whenever she's played from the top of your deck, which is instantly gives you a lot of fuel. And then she just makes it a lot easier and more convenient to raid the 4-cost Rukia. And the 4-cost Rukia is actually just really strong. She gives you one of the best draw effects in the game, and the fact that she sidelines so much from those cards you draw just really helps you fuel your sideline a lot faster. So I think that there's an argument to run Byakuya without Ichigo. I think there's an argument to run it with Ichigo. I think the reason that I'm in this deck list choosing to run it without Ichigo is the fact that the Ichigo 1-cost and the Byakuya 3-cost conflict a little bit because of the color trigger. So as you know, you can't run more than 4 of a color trigger in your deck. So I think that it's interesting to have this 1-cost Renji that lets you draw one, sideline one. This replaces the need for the Uryu, and it also makes you have another raid target for the 4-cost Renji. So Renji becomes even more effective as a raid character. And so I really like the way this is shaping out. I'll have to get my hands on it and test it to know how strong it is, but it's looking really good on paper to me right now. And then I am running the 3-cost in this deck list. I'm running the 3-cost Kisuke Urahara, not so much because I want to, but because this deck does need another 2 energy generating character, and because I'm running the 2-cost Byakuya and the 1-cost Renji, I'm already at that perfect 8 number. So I'm running the 3-cost Kisuke to have more energy gen, but without losing triggers. So I think this deck looks pretty good. I did add in 2 of the Ichigo 4-cost. That guy is so strong though that I could definitely see him going up, and he doesn't require any rating, so he's a kind of like a must add in any Purple Bleach deck. But he is so strong, gets impact 1, damage 2 out of 4-cost character as long as you have the required number of cards in your sideline. Just a super strong card. And I could easily see him going up to 4 in my complete deck list once I get around to it, but I'll have to figure out what to get rid of to add him. Moving on to the deck that's probably going to be number 2, and that's partly because of where the meta's at, but we've seen that Toshiro has a lot of staying power. So I think when he came out, compared to a lot of the decks that were running just pure removal at the time, he seemed a little lackluster, right? Because he just permanently switches characters to resting as opposed to removing them. However, once Saitama came out, all of a sudden switching cards to resting permanently became a really solid effect. So I think that Toshiro is going to have, definitely after all this support comes out, Toshiro is going to have another time to shine in the meta. He'll probably be top tier for sure after this set comes out. And this deck just has a lot of tools. It has that Toshiro, which is a 4-cost character, permanently switches to resting. But then you also have your 4-cost Kenpachi, the 2 action point character you play to the front line, and it sidelines a character up to 4,000 BP, depending on how many characters you have in your field with the 13 Court Guard Squad affinity. But I think what goes a step beyond that is you do have the Raid Kenpachi, who's just a crazy strong character. And I think the most interesting about him, other than he has impact and damage 2, I believe, the turn he's played, he also gets to, if you've raided him on top of one of your other Kenpachis, when he's defeated, I think it is, or sidelined, you essentially get to keep the base character. So I think that's how it works. But it kind of plays into just how indestructible he is. So that makes him just a really strong character. So between all of that, you also do have the 4-cost Kenpachi, who's the 1 action point 4-cost Kenpachi, and he has that can't be reduced by BP reducing effects, and that's going to be really timely, I should say, once Purple Bleach comes out, once Bleach Volume 2 comes out, because for a while Purple Bleach is probably going to dominate the meta. And also that's a handy tech to have against even decks like Purple Kogias that love to do BP reduction. So I think he'll see a lot of play, that 4-cost. And then you do have the this deck list I'm sharing has that Yoruichi, the 1-cost Yoruichi that lets you grant, I think it's impact. But I think there's also an argument to be made for the 1-cost that we already have that lets you switch a Kenpachi to active. I think if you're running the raid package, then you may not need that switch to active as much. That's probably why there's this 1-cost Yoruichi. But yeah, really solid deck. I love that Kenpachi has gotten so much support. I think that you could easily run an all Toshiro deck. You could easily run an all Kenpachi deck. But I think that probably what we're going to find the strongest combo of all for Bleach Green is one that leverages both Kenpachi and Toshiro, because both those guys are just so strong and help you deal with the meta so well when you have them together. And then moving on to the strongest deck, that's going to come out of Volume 2 and really going to catapult Purple Bleach back to the top of the standings once again. And that's Purple Bleach with Ichigo. So this deck, like any deck in Union Arena, you can build it a lot of ways. But I think that the way that it's probably going to be the most effective and reliable is to really build it largely around Ichigo and Rukia. All of a sudden, because you have this 4-cost Ichigo with damage 2 and impact, you don't really need Renji anymore. I think Renji still works really well for different reasons in Byakuya, partly because he has that BP reduction, which helps a lot. But you just really don't need him. And all of a sudden, at this point where we're at in the game, having to pay an action point to get damage 2 is a lot less handy than it once was. So you'd much rather have a character like the 4-cost Ichigo that just has the damage 2 natively. And you still have, 4, 8, 12, 16 4K characters in this deck, so no problem there with just relying on Rukia and Ichigo. And you're really just looking to fuel that sideline as much as possible to just destroy your opponent with 5-cost Ichigo. And then you're using the 4-cost Ichigo to just really do a lot of damage and hit your opponent where it hurts. It's one of the strongest characters we've seen, having both those at 4-cost, and you basically have to reach a certain number of cards in your sideline. But because of Rukia, you have the 0-cost Rukia that lets you sideline. That's just not going to be super hard to reach. So Purple Bleach is definitely a huge threat to the meta once it comes out. Expect to see it everywhere. It's going to probably be number 1 deck when it comes out. But there's definitely plenty of ways to deal with it because we have such a diverse and strong meta right now. There's plenty of ways to deal with that deck. So I think it will be a really good time at tournaments once this set comes out, and especially good for Bleach fans because you have so much new tools to work with. So I hope that helps give you an idea of what's coming up in the upcoming Bleach Union Arena set. It's a crazy month for TCG fans, a crazy month for Union Arena fans, because on that same day, Black Clover is coming out. So we're going to talk a bit about that as well. But I hope you enjoy, and I hope that this helps you get a solid understanding of what's to come, helps you figure out what deck you want to invest in. So until next time.